Today's discussion will be presented in three sections since we are recording this session for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Feel free to post questions and comments during the session and we'll try to get them answered online. We are particularly pleased to welcome our moderator, Tom Temin, anchor of the Federal Drive on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Let me turn over the reins to Tom to begin today's discussion.
Thank you for joining us and welcome to the program. Our guests today are Terry Halverson, the CIO of the Department of the Navy, Lee Vorthman, the Chief Technology Officer for Federal Civilian Agencies at NetApp, U.S. Public Sector, David Bray, the CIO of the Federal Communications Commission, thank you, Jack Nichols, the Solutions Architect at CDWG, and John Montel, the Electronic Records Manager in the Office of the CIO at the Interior Department. It's great to have you all. And of course, all of the big data discussions that we've had up until now tend to concentrate on the tools for mining information out of big data. Today, we're going to talk about the back end of all of this, the kinds of data centers, networks, and virtualization, and all these technologies, storage required to serve up big data, make sure that the government can handle it properly. So I thought a good place to start would be asking our government guests today what your data center optimization strategy is, what you're doing with data centers in support of big data and other modern IT initiatives. And maybe consolidation might be part of it, but really we want to concentrate on optimizing more than consolidating. Why don't we start with the Navy Department with Terry Halverson?
Okay. Well, the first thing I would talk about is optimization to me right now is focused on cost savings. So I am not as focused on consolidating or closing data centers, but in saving the money with the data centers. Now, there is a relationship between closing and savings, but it's not one for one. And the second part of your question, I think, gets to a little bit, what are we doing on our optimization plan? What technologies are we using? Well, the Department of Navy is big enough that I can actually tell you we're going to use all of them. Whatever blend of technologies work best to get our mission sets done at the best cost. That means we're going to increase virtualization. We're doing that now. We're at about 41% across the Don for virtualization. Our goal is to be 80% here by the end of the fit-up. I think we'll make that. We're also looking at the types of data centers. Lots of breakthroughs in technology there. The new pod data centers a lot less dependent on environmental factors. So you don't need raised floor. You can put them on a concrete slab. You can put them out in the weather. And some places that's an ideal solution. Some cases we still have to worry about because of the way our applications are configured. Latency is a problem, so that's still going to mean that we want the data and the data center close to the user. But where we have a lot of those, trying to consolidate those in key places, for me, that means fleet concentration areas, Norfolk, San Diego. We are going to do some forklift. Forklift meaning you just pick up the data and you put it in a new place because it saves more money in the new location. But they'll always almost have a second and third effect where once you get the data there, what are you doing to optimize the data? And I would tell you, I don't see much of a difference in my overall data center data strategy for big data, little data. It's still how do you optimize it in the right storage locations, the right price. The other thing that we are doing inside the Don is we want to get between 75% of our data stored in some version of a commercial environment. And that could mean, in a commercial facility, completely public cloud. Some of you are aware we've signed an agreement with Amazon. Our public-facing websites are on Amazon. To using, we are a partner with HP. They won our NGen contract. That's part of our commercial solution. It could go all the way out where we may say, hey, let's lease some space in the government for somebody to come in and optimize and run a data center for us, to doing private solutions with companies. But we do believe that for our NIPR-NET environment, the unclassified environment, getting about 75% of that into some set of commercial solutions probably meets mission at the best value for us. I mean, we're seeing anywhere from 66% to 20% savings as we move into the different variations of commercial.
All right, a lot going on. And Dave Bray at FCC, I think from a standpoint of technology, the agency is almost unrecognizable from, say, 5 years ago, at least from the public-facing websites. What's going on behind the scenes to support all of that?
Well, it's interesting you say that. So I've been at the FCC now for about 6 months, and I often say that being a new CIO is like buying a used car, driving it off the lot, and then looking at the engine and saying, what did I actually buy? The FCC actually has 207 different IT systems, and this is for a agency that's only 1,754 people. So it's essentially one system for every 9 people that we have. The systems themselves, behind the scenes, more than 40%, and this was 2 years ago, are more than 10 years old. And so I think the big thing that we're looking with data and data centers is really just trying to extract from those legacy systems data in a usable form where we can actually build a big table across that. And so that, we have multiple licensing systems. If you are a Verizon or AT&T, you don't have to log on to several different systems that we have that are public facing. You can instead look at one.
The chairman, Tom Wheeler, recently made an impassioned plea to appropriators to help us modernize the infrastructure.
Yes. The good news is he also has come on board recently, and so the timing has been well, where we now have an IT-savvy chairman that comes from venture capital, and he's looked at our infrastructure, and basically the assessment is we will spend more maintaining the legacy infrastructure over 2 years than we would if we were actually modernize what we need to do. And so while we are trying to focus on cost savings, it really is just trying to do cost savings in terms of doing the O&M to maintain what we have. There's a lot of nested procedures, a lot of stored procedures in our data. It's not in a good usable form. I would actually say our website also, that's one of the things that actually we do get from both our partners and our staffers could be improved. And so we're really embarking on a modernization journey with what we're doing. And with that, trying to think about how can we make the data the FCC has both more usable to folks within the FCC, but even more importantly, more usable to our partners as well as citizens. We did launch, since I arrived, we launched the FCC Speed Test app, which is an example of where we want to go. So the Speed Test app is available on iOS as well as the Google Play Store. It was the number 4 app on iOS, which I think is a first for a government agency. And what it is the code is open source. You can take a look at it. If you download it and choose to consent to the terms, 3 times a day it collects your broadband connection speed and anonymously shares that with a third party that then shares it with the FCC, which we then share back with the public. So you can actually visualize by provider, by connection speed, the first sort of real-time crowdsourced map of connection speed across the FCC. So that's sort of the model where we want to go, because again, we're small. I mean, compared to Navy and other agencies, we're only 1,700 people. So how can we engage the public to help do some of the things that we do?
And by the way, my own house is on the FCC program for collecting information on wired connections. I have the Ask Sam report every month. I'm wondering how long they need to keep taking it, because the speeds are the same for a couple of years. But do you have a 2B model for what you would like the infrastructure to look like at this point?
Yes, the 2B, the vision that we have, and that's assuming that we get the funds that we need to do modernization, is that we actually have a single data mart for the 207 different systems. It's now pulling it in. That data mart is then allowing us to both make the data accessible to people within the FCC, but we also are doing the appropriate open APIs so it's available to our partners as well as to the public. There's the ability to remix it on the website itself, but then if you want to download it and do some things with yourself, you can do that as well. We do know that there's a lot of interest in terms of the data that the FCC is receiving. I really think the vision that the chairman would like to have and that we would like to have as well is that we become a brokerage of data and a trusted provider of data at the FCC.
Okay, good. And John, Interior has made a lot of progress too. Tell us the state of the art now for your data centers, data infrastructure, and where you're like to be heading over the next couple of years.
Yeah, so the Department of Interior, as you know, started in 2010 in its IT transformation initiative. With 300 plus data centers across the United States, we've really identified 6 core data centers that we want to standardize on. We recently awarded an IDIQ. It was a GWAC for cloud hosting, so that we can begin to consolidate all these. And we've right now we're at about 40% consolidation, and I think the goal is by 2020 to at least get them all into these 6 data centers, and then leverage this GWAC that we've invested in to provide services where applicable and centralize our data. We're leveraging a lot of standards. We're leveraging NEAM. We're leveraging Cloud First. We're leveraging cross-data pollination through multiple systems, not only records, which is my area in information governance, but geospatial mapping, services that support VTL and other areas that we need to take to the next level and begin to realize some of the data savings inside this IT transformation initiative.
We're going to turn to industry now, and I wanted to start with Jack Nichols from CDWG. The question I always like to ask people like you and in positions like yours is, what do you see when you look across government? Because you've got a view across many agencies. What's the status of data centers, and do they look pretty modern now, or is there a way to go?
Well, I think there's a way to go, certainly, and I think there's a mix of what you see. So some are further ahead than others, certainly. But I see, across the board, really everybody striving to get to where folks like Mr. Halverson and John and the DOI have really done some trailblazing kinds of efforts and are trying to follow in those footsteps. So I think that's a very good sign. But varying states of virtualization and data center consolidation. But for the most part, everybody trying to do the right thing.
So they're working there. And Lee, of course, you're in the appliance and stuff business. And is the equipment that is in the average data center now, do you think, optimal for what people are trying to do? We've heard a lot of efforts to try to optimize and support missions ultimately. But do they have what they need in there?
I think for the most part, they probably do. There are some interesting trends that are emerging where I think the agencies can start to take advantage of these new technologies that can help out, right? So there's things like when you're talking about going to converged infrastructure or cloud, how do you make sure that your overall infrastructure has the resources that you need, and that may require modernization or upgrading. There's also trends where, as you begin to federate these, resources across a giant single infrastructure, you have to look at, okay, how are we going to get the performance out of that? How are we going to make sure people get the resources? And things like virtualization, things like flash performance pools that give you the resources you need on demand, all of those type of technologies are going to become more important. And those are technologies that have recently emerged into the mainstream, I'd say, in the last year to 18 months. And most agencies are, again, as we've heard, are struggling with where's the right place to put these and how can we do that most effectively.
Okay, let's talk about data itself for a minute. And we've heard the idea of consolidating data in large marts. We've also talked about data is data, whether it's big data or operational data. Terry, I wanted to ask you, is there a specific big data strategy or area of the Navy, or is all data looked at the same and it's just available to applications? I mean, how do you look at data in the context of that big data word?
Yeah, and I keep repeating my answer here, but the answer for us is yes, there's a data strategy. Yes, there's a big data strategy. I mean, if we looked at the Navy as where it stands in the Fortune 500, on any given day we're Fortune 3 or 4. We are in fact a coalition of multiple companies and multiple businesses. So much like some of the other big communities, and let's see, so we have the national intelligence community. We're part of that. We have a big data strategy for the national intelligence community. How do you move that data? How do you make it accessible faster? And more importantly, how do you get to the analysis of data faster? I mean, I would tell you that part of our big data problem isn't having data. We actually have lots and lots and lots of data. Having spent some time operational, my biggest problem was never having too much data. It was having too little intelligence. So how do we fix that? So looking at some of the new technology and tools in that area is certainly something we're doing. How do you get to the analysis? How can you automate more analysis? That's even true on the business side. That means you have to have a much better understanding of your business processes. So the other part that I would say, when you're going to do big data, you also have to do big processes. And that means you have to go look at your processes. And one of the myths used to be you never let IT drive your process. Well, the bigger thing I think is never say never. There are certain times when you're looking across big enterprises where you absolutely want to say, you know what, this is the best IT practice. You need to change your process to fit that so that we optimize and save the money. That's not always true, and you want to blend that. But to say, well, you're always going to let the business process drive the IT, not the answer anymore, particularly with some of the new technologies. We have some business areas. We have an ERP system in the Navy. I'm not going to tell you we are getting our full use out of it. We're not. We're looking at how we do that. Part of the answer is how do you take that across all of the business lanes that we have, and they are different. And different businesses use and look at data differently. How do you merge that? How do you standardize, frankly, down to the data element level that says this is the same element and same shared data that I need across all businesses? Here's the ones that are slightly different for these connected but different businesses. So in addition to what I would call the business process, we have to understand the data better. And that's everything from the structure of the data, the value of the data. How do you do shared data elements? How do you collapse the number of authoritative data sources? I mean, interesting, and we still have this problem. We've done some good work, but I will have maybe 3 authoritative sources for the same data element. That's not a good plan. So getting down and doing the data analysis, that's probably the longest pole in our tent too, is to get and understand our structure enough to get down to where we have the data element in a single place it needs to be, and then can share out and reach to all of the systems and apps that need to use it.
Duplicating all
Correct.
over the world also, too.
That's
a
correct.
big issue, too, for storage and infrastructure. And, John, you mentioned that Interior, you're responsible in the records area, but there's also mapping data and so forth. There's what I heard was a diversity of data types. How do you get those all together? I mean, what kind of a database can you put that all in?
Yeah, so we're taking some very initial steps, preliminary steps. We have a lot of applications, a lot of data, and a lot of historically non-structured data, just simply due to the diversity of the agency. We've adopted, if you remember the M1313 initiative, the OMB directive that came out on open standards. We're leveraging NEAM, XML, and XMLT, and we're trying to design from the core up a common data language that we can, as we migrate all of these technologies into our hosting environments and start to move things into the cloud, that we can better define single layers of identity across multiple applications so that we don't have to develop interconnected applications to cross-pollinate data. And the result is that we want to, and leveraging on what Terry said, that we want to leverage all of this data to better understand how we communicate internally and build metrics that we can then look at our business processes and understand the reason why. I think it's more, it goes well beyond that of simply consolidating and moving all this data into the cloud. We have to better understand why we communicate the way we do to leverage that ROI.
All right, we're going to take a short break on that note. Our guests today are Terry Halverson, the CIO of the Navy Department, John Montell, Electronics Records Manager in the Office of the CIO at the Interior Department, David Bray, CIO of the Federal Communications Commission, Jack Nichols, Solution Architect at CDWG, and Lee Vorthman, the Chief Technology Officer for Federal Civilian Agencies at NetApp, U.S. Public Sector. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin, on the catalyst for government's big data revolution. This panel discussion sponsored by NetApp and CDWG here on Federal News Radio and 1500 AM.